Hey, cool people. Welcome back to the WPMRR WordPress podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Darth Maul.
And you're listening to the WordPress Business Podcast. We've got Darth Maul on the pod this week. Hopefully you're doing okay after getting lightsabered in half the other day. That must have been pretty rough.
You know, life's a little bit tough afterward, but hey, now I get to join you on this podcast, so it's not that bad.
That's right. People who are listening actually don't know our podcast studio is actually at the bottom of that pit that Darth Maul got sliced down. So it's actually perfect. You dropped right in and now we're recording. So cool. So we got Darth Maul this week, also known as David Ly Khim. David, this is like a WordPress podcast, kind of. It's, I guess, for WordPress professionals, but people trying to build a business for themselves, etc. You don't work necessarily for a WordPress company, but you work for a business that works with a lot of WordPress companies. So why don't you kind of give people a little bit of background about what you do?
Yeah. So my background with WordPress actually goes back maybe almost 10 years now. I've been building my own personal website on WordPress. I used to tinker around a lot. I was one of those guys that, I'd want my website to look a certain way, end up staying up until 4 a.m. just going through the code and making it look perfect, or at least trying to. And, ever since then, I continue to recommend WordPress as the CRM that people get started with whenever they need a website. And it's interesting because, HubSpot, while we don't do anything directly in WordPress, our website's not built on WordPress, but a lot of our customers do use WordPress as the CMS of choice, and that makes complete sense. And a lot of our agency partners also service clients who use WordPress, and it just made sense for us to better understand how we can serve these users who are using a different CMS from HubSpot, but still want to continue using HubSpot's tools. My job is to make sure that we're giving them the best experience possible. And, we've got a long way to go. This has been a relatively new initiative for us, but we're learning as we go, and we're getting to speak to a lot of customers. And it's been a good journey so far. And I think it's going to continue being extremely interesting learning from the community.
Yeah, that's so cool. I remember you guys were at WordCamp because we had a sponsorship booth and you guys were like 4 sponsorship booths down from us. This was just after we had hired our new head of marketing, Kaylin, and she was like nerding out that HubSpot had a booth there. She was like, I'm HubSpot certified and like these 5 things, like amazing. She was like hanging out at your booth and we were like, HubSpot, like, and look at this, like what, 5-6 months later, we're kind of big HubSpot users. I guess I wouldn't say power users yet, but moving into becoming power users. We use HubSpot, the whole sales CRM. We're pretty deep into it at this point.
Yeah, that makes me really happy to hear. And that sponsorship was extremely interesting because it was kind of the first time when we got engaged in the community, and we wanted to come in very lightly. We're new entrants and we want to understand the community, not come in with a huge splash, we actually got some really interesting responses where some people were saying, we don't see you guys very often here. And it allowed us to start having a conversation of, hey, we're here, we're trying to learn, we want to meet all of you community members and understand what value we can provide. And it was a fun time.
Yeah, very cool. WordPress is one of those funny communities that once you get into it, you realize kind of how powerful it is. I think a lot of people have heard of WordPress. Oh yeah, you build websites on it. You're obviously experienced in it. You've tinkered with websites for years now. And then you hear these facts like, 1 out of 3 major websites on the web uses WordPress. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Not only just because of the real estate that exists on WordPress, but if a third of those websites are powered by WordPress, that means a third, or probably even most likely even more, since WordPress is so powerful in terms of SEO, in terms of if you want to market your site, you want your site to show up in search results. It's really powerful for that as well. So yeah, I think people are starting to realize like WordPress is a good place to be. And actually, if I'm being honest, I think HubSpot even continued to get into it earlier than a lot of people. I think WordPress is still kind of like, WordPress, whatever, but we don't see as many of kind of like the Googles or HubSpots in yet. So, but you guys kind of both have come in early. So it's cool to see you guys there.
Yeah, it's exciting. And it makes me happy to hear that we see the WordPress community as a really strong community where there's a lot of folks that we can serve. We've been told that, it'd be great if HubSpot can bring some of that marketing acumen and help educate some of the community where it's a lot of small businesses or folks who are just getting started on a new website that could use more of that SEO knowledge or content marketing knowledge. So yeah, I'm excited to chat with you about those things today.
Yeah, for sure. We run like a semi-successful business here. HubSpot is pretty expensive software. And so to get into it at a high level is going to require a significant investment. So far from what I've seen, though, that investment really pays off. It's a big investment to be in, but it pays out on the other side in terms of the output it gives you. At least for us, it has. So there are a good number of people in the WordPress space who I've been like, yeah, we're starting to use HubSpot. It's been really good. So hopefully we can help share the love a little bit. Yeah, cool. And your background, I guess, is in you've done some WordPress stuff in the past, but also kind of content marketing is kind of an area you focused on.
Yeah, I got started in marketing through SEO and content marketing. And through that, it was kind of in the dark ages of SEO when I started. Fortunately, I didn't get involved in too much the black hat stuff. So I'm quite pure in that sense. But my focus has always been on content marketing in the beginning, and then it's slowly evolved into more doing partnerships and product management. And it's been interesting seeing how content has evolved, as more and more companies start seeing the value of content marketing. HubSpot was one of the pioneers of that sort of inbound marketing movement.
Yeah, I think didn't HubSpot even term inbound marketing?
Yes,
I think
we
that's
did.
true.
Yeah, our co-founders, Brian and Dharmesh, wrote a book on it. Now businesses around the world, there's millions of blogs being published every day, from what I understand. And as that has happened, content marketing has become more and more difficult. It's harder to stand out because there's so many people that are potentially writing about the same exact thing that you are. And I think that's actually a great thing. With competition, it means that the bar for excellence has increased. You can't be mediocre at content marketing now. You need to actually have good content that's educational or entertaining and actually provides value. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, that just because there's more content, yes, there's a lot of really bad stuff, but it also means that marketers are forced to think about what their customers and their users are looking for even more than just trying to put out junk content.
Yeah, for sure. Any advice for people? And honestly, this is actually kind of for me, like hearing from someone at HubSpot. I love talking to people at HubSpot because y'all know so much about the content marketing and inbound marketing and whatever you want to call it. It's all kind of a similar space. But in terms of writing, good quality versus bad quality from the opinion of Google, because at the end of the day, if you want to appear in search results, I don't know, maybe you want to appear in Bing results or DuckDuckGo results. That would be fine. But, if you want whatever 93% of searches done online, you probably want to show up in Google too. What are some of the two or three most basic things someone can do? They're starting a blog, they've written a few articles, but they really want to push into getting into search results and do a better job just driving traffic to their site. What are like the two or three things they should do to like really get started in order to like have an impact there? Maybe not quickly, because I think a lot of people have heard this. SEO doesn't just work after a month. You don't just write an article and go to number one, but maybe it'll take 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe a year to really start driving traffic and leads. But what are those few things people can really start doing now that'll pay off in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do tend to get that question a lot. So before we get into that, it's interesting that you bring up Bing, because we've actually found that there are a decent number of people using Bing search for there to be a good return on Bing ads and optimizing for Bing. So maybe that's something for your listeners to think about a little bit, not completely write it off. But
little nugget right there.
There might be something there. But
don't tell everyone. I just give that to me, man. But off air.
Let's just not publish this episode. But for content SEO, the thing that I see a lot of folks making mistakes is they try to do everything at once. It's not just writing one blog post. If anything, they try to write 50 blog posts in a couple months and hope that they rank. Where what HubSpot, and I advise even some clients I have on the side to do, is to really narrow in on maybe one or two topics you want to own. And at HubSpot, we call this the pillar and cluster model, where you want to own a really broad topic, and that topic may have subtopics surrounding it. And instead of trying to write about a bunch of different topics, you focus in on that main topic, and you have maybe 5 to 10 blog posts covering different categories within that topic. And what that does is, when you link internally across those different pieces of content, let's say right now you have 10 pieces and they're about workouts, and say you write about body weight exercises or workout routines while traveling, workout routines with no machines, workout routines in a small gym, and things like that. All those are subtopics about working out. And when you cover all those topics and interlink them together with your content architecture, that shows Google that oh, this website knows a lot about working out. And because it has these different pieces of content, and within the network of content, it covers these different subcategories, and there's a lot of search for it, perhaps we should rank them a bit higher. And that's the way Google sees the expertise. You know, one blog post here about one topic and another about a second topic and another about a third topic will not see as much success as trying to own one entire topic in its entirety.
Cool. I think that's really good advice for people to start off with, because if you're starting off with 10 pieces of content, you don't want to make those 10 totally disjointed pieces of content. Like, really attack one area. I'll kind of give listeners a good example of something we've done at WP Buffs. We focus pretty significantly on producing content, and so I just did a search for WP Buffs backup, and so we've got like all the best backup and restore plugins. That's an article we wrote. We also wrote one on how to restore a WordPress website from a backup, like the end-to-end guide, like go through the whole process. We have an article here, like the ultimate WordPress Google Drive backup tutorial. We found a lot of people were searching for doing backups with Google Drive and how I can connect my Google Drive. So we did a whole article on that. So this is just kind of a small example of how we've actually done something similar. So I'm happy to hear what you're saying, because I feel like that means hopefully we're somewhat on the right path. But yeah, I mean, but the reason for that is not just because we just wanted to do some content on backups. We kind of strategically did that because we do run a maintenance service and a 24/7 support service that we do backups for people. So when people come and want to read about backups, maybe they'll say, backups are taking up a lot of my time. Why don't I just let this company do it? So it kind of leads through that funnel, helps us rank, and then hopefully helps us in that conversion funnel as well. So I think that's important too.
Exactly. And I think the other question people come up with after that is, how do I know what topics to cover, right? And I'm sure you know this, where it's a combination of, well, what is your product or service? And also, what are people searching for? So there is the foundational element of keyword research and making sure that you find the keywords that actually map to what you're selling, because you can be getting hundreds of thousands of views for random keywords, but those may not lead to any sales. And that's just looking at the wrong metric, right? And I'm sure this is something that you thought a lot about.
Yeah, very much. I mean, you said it, and I have an example of that, kind of unfortunately, but also fortunately, I don't know. So our biggest traffic driver in terms of a single article, it probably drives 20 to 25% of like all of our traffic, maybe closer to 20%, but it's an article that converts horribly. Like, it doesn't convert anybody. And honestly, it was kind of a crappy article I wrote like 3 years ago, and somehow it ranks really well. I don't really know exactly why it does or how it does, but it does, and it converts really badly. So it's not good because we get all this traffic that doesn't convert, but it's also like it adds to our overall traffic. It does get us traffic. So Google does see a lot of traffic coming to our website because of it. So it's not all bad. But at the same time, you want your traffic to convert, because if Google sees traffic coming to you and then bouncing, it's going to be like, the site's shitty. So there's a lot wrapped into that. But yes, I think that's a big actually mistake we made early on, was just writing content that was low hanging fruit, which is kind of a best practice. You want to look for low competition, higher volume keywords if possible. Even though when you're starting off, the volume may be low for your keyword phrases. But the thing people forget a lot is like that piece of content should be pretty related to however your website's making money. So for us, if we were talking about random things in the WordPress space that weren't around speed, security, or backups or other things that we do, it may not have been as effective for us. So good thing to keep out for, but that's a good piece of advice for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I might go on a little bit of a rant, but there is...
Let's do it. That's what this podcast is for.
I do think that content marketing does get a bad rep. You know, when people think about, how do I generate leads or sales now? They're thinking about, cold calling, or they're thinking about running paid ads. And, paid ads are a really easy way to see immediate return if you're doing them well, but it's not sustainable. You continue to see decreases in ROI. What actually happens is, with all that data you get from running paid ads, you can actually start a really targeted content marketing strategy using the keywords that you're already targeting through paid, because you can actually see which keywords are converting. And instead of paying for those keywords, you can actually just start ranking on those keywords organically. And so it's a little bit ironic when people say, oh, we need to keep running paid ads, but in reality, it's not mutually exclusive. You can be doing this content marketing strategy, start ranking for that keyword, not have to pay for it anymore. And if you do decide to keep paying for it, you actually rank multiple times on the first page of Google. So it's you do win if you put more effort into content marketing. And I'll see there was a mattress company I was looking at. I like to look at the content strategy of companies that I buy products from because I'm just curious, and I'm curious how these companies got so popular. There's a mattress company that I saw ranks for the phrase, "How long does a sloth sleep?" Which is great. For some reason, there's a ton of volume around that phrase, but
I just searched that the other day. I searched that 10 times the other day. Of course it is.
Like, no one's going to buy a mattress after reading how long a sloth sleeps for. But this website's ranking for that phrase for whatever reason. So it's one of those things where I'm sure it's great that they see traffic coming in, but it's not going to generate sales. So it's a very top of the funnel keyword to rank for, which is a whole different thing to talk about for content strategy.
Yeah, that's funny. So we actually, we do some keyword research for ourselves as well. And I've just looked up to see what we rank for, like outside of what we're trying to rank for, just like random keywords we're ranking for. And WP Buffs is kind of a funny company because we rank for some like kind of random stuff around like buff, like totally irrelevant to what we do, but somehow we're still ranking on like the first page for some random buff term. And there's some crazy stuff in there that we weren't at all trying to rank for, but just kind of it showed up. I guess that happens as well.
But what's the strangest thing you're ranking for?
Oh man, you put me on the spot. I can't even remember what it was. I just remember that it wasn't. I think it was some like gym thing, like some sort of strength training something. But it wasn't related to like digital stuff at all. So that's always kind of funny. So one thing I kind of actually wanted to talk about now that we're talking a little bit about content marketing is, so we obviously kind of, since inbound marketing is so important for us, it drives so many of our leads and partners and website traffic and all that. So we measure that kind of usually it's on a month-to-month basis, but I'm kind of digging in a little more frequently because I just like to look at that stuff. But we found from March to April, just looking at those 2 months, we found we actually lost traffic somewhat significantly for the first time really in my memory. I think we lost like 5 to 7% of our overall organic traffic. So I'm kind of looking in, seeing what's happening. I see there's a big update in March. I did some digging and some research, and what I found was we actually lost some rankings in some older pieces of content that we hadn't really done a significant update to in a while. And we had gone from like number 1 to number 2 or 3 for like 15 or so different articles. And we were getting good traffic from those. So over the course of all those, we lost, I don't know, it was like 20,000 unique views or something, which is significant. And so we're putting a big plan together right now to go back instead of putting our resources into creating all sorts of new content in terms of written content, we're actually steering back our resources and saying, let's go back and redo some of this old content. Is this something you hear pretty frequently that people do, especially when they're running blogs that have content that they wrote maybe a year or 2 years ago? It's a little bit out of date.
Unfortunately, I don't hear it often enough. We of course at HubSpot we created a name for it. We call it historical optimization. So
of course, inbound marketing will invent this term. Historical. What is it? Historical what?
Optimization. We love creating names, but that's wonderful that you do that, because our belief is more content is not necessarily better. And if a company has already started creating some sort of content, there's plenty of opportunity to try to generate more opportunities and optimize that content than creating new content. So that's something that we would like people to do more of, because it means that they're likely going back and making it more valuable, updating it so information is more relevant. And that goes not just for improving it for SEO purposes, but also for potential conversion. If you're getting traffic to it, maybe you could be testing it so that you're getting more leads from that blog post, or that you're getting more sales.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've also been thinking a lot as we've been going back and restoring old articles. Obviously, there's kind of the primary reason. Well, I don't even know if I'd call it primary. One of the reasons is we want to make sure our rankings go back up and that Google sees us as having the most authoritative piece of content in whatever area we're trying to rank for. And the second is like what you said, we want to keep driving leads. That content, we want people to come to that content, really be like, this is really great content. So impressive, in fact, that I'm going to download this ebook, or I'm going to go sign up for this webinar, or I'm going to go listen to this podcast. Like that's how you win on the internet. But the third piece I've actually been focusing on a lot as I've been going through old content is like, we run a blog that, gets 150,000 unique, visitors a month. That's a lot of people that come to our blog for advice. It's actually really important for us to update our content, not just because of those two things, but because if we give out outdated advice to people and, 10,000 people visit this blog post and get outdated advice, that's on us. It's kind of our responsibility to make sure our content stays updated, kind of for like the good of the web, you know? So that's something I think that I've been thinking a little bit about that I think is also true. It's like, if you run a blog that's big enough, that's getting all this content, it's kind of your responsibility to maintain that content too. I'm not saying it's easy to do that or that it doesn't take resources to do that, because it definitely is. Like, I'm putting this big plan together and it's a lot of stuff, but it's important, you know, to do that for the good of the people and the good of the WordPress community and the WordPress space, I think.
Yeah, I do love that you do that. I honestly don't hear that very often. And, you know, it's funny that you bring that up, because at HubSpot, we recently started doing kind of this user experience audit across our product, across our website. And we realized that, well, there are some pieces of a product that we definitely wanted to improve, and we're always working to get feedback and improve that. We also realized that the blog, while, you know, it worked in a sense that it functioned and there weren't any bugs, we found blog posts from, say, 2007 that were completely outdated. We had to make the decision: do we remove this blog post because it's completely irrelevant, or do we update it? And depending on the blog post, whether it was ranking for certain keywords or if it was actually valuable or relevant, some we updated, some we actually just deleted. But we've been going through this process that we're calling content pruning, another term that we just decided to create, of, you know, the content can either be updated, deleted, or redirected to something more relevant. And that's how we continue to just make sure that the quality of our blog stays good, or as good as we can keep it, besides those stray things that just happen to show up that is not linked to anywhere, which shouldn't be happening anymore. But yeah, I love that, you know, even as a company that, you know, probably doesn't publish as much as HubSpot does, that you continue to maintain a quality of your website. And I think more companies should do that.
Well, we try to do our best. I think there's probably always a little gap in terms of what we're actually doing and what we would like to ideally do. But I think that's probably always the case with most things. I don't think you ever really get to a finish line of things.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's cool though that you guys do that content pruning and are always looking to kind of maybe even take away content if it's not performing well. We have probably the first like 10 or 20 articles on our blog. You can go back and see them now. We have not done the content pruning yet, kind of because somehow, for some reason, I like having them up there. Like, I like people being able to go back and see my old crappy posts and kind of like, it's okay. Like, my stuff was crappy too when we started. I mean, some of the stuff is, you know, nothing I still put out is perfect, but, you know, we all start somewhere. So I kind of like that story. But I do want to perform well. So maybe it's something I want to look into. But you talked a little bit about the pruning and stuff. The running experiments is something else that I know that you guys do a lot of at HubSpot. I always think about like Facebook. I have a friend who works at Facebook, and he's always talking about, not always, but we've talked about how people can run their own experiments there kind of however they want to, and they can gather data and then they can show that data to someone. If they wanted to do their own experiment, they may be able to find something interesting just because they went and did it. I don't want to dive into the whole Facebook data conversation. That is a whole nother episode, but I do think it's cool that anybody is able to experiment with things and find some results, and maybe they'll be interesting. So is HubSpot someplace where you're kind of able to be a little bit entrepreneurial and you're kind of testing out different things or looking at different ways to do things?
Yeah, 100%. So at HubSpot, everyone has access to whatever data they may want access to. So it's quite easy to start digging in. Granted, not everyone has the time to do that, but people are very encouraged to look into the data, form hypotheses, ask questions on why things are the way they are. So a lot of our experiments do take place within our product itself. Some of it is on our website. We've done some content experiments as well, just trying new formats and things like that. But whenever we run experiments, the mindset that we always have is, what are my assumptions? Why do I have these assumptions? How do I prove that they're right or wrong? And just making sure that we're always testing those assumptions versus assuming that those assumptions are correct. I think that's the biggest mistake, assuming that you know the user 100% well, which is very unlikely the case. So one example is we had tested our sign-up funnel. We have, I believe it was 6 steps through that funnel. And we thought, maybe we can improve the conversion rate if we add some social proof, because social proof works. It's a foundation of marketing, foundation of human psychology. So we
And
thought,
social proof would be like putting an embedded tweet in there that someone said, "Oh, this person's cool," or even just like a review that someone left.
right. Yeah, we used a review, I believe, from Shopify, which is quite a reputable company. We showed some industry awards that we've gotten, and we showed some logos of different companies that do use our product. Turns out it didn't work for us, surprisingly. So we actually found out that there might have been a bunch of variables involved that we didn't control for. But what we found was when we looked at the funnel as a whole, without looking at any specific segment of people signing up, adding social proof didn't improve the conversion rate. And that made us wonder, well, why didn't it improve the conversion rate? And we started asking ourselves, well, what was our assumption that social proof works? Okay, what was our assumption? That the sign-up flow didn't have bugs, potentially? What were some other assumptions? That users were at a point where social proof would affect their user journey. And we looked at all those assumptions, and we actually found out that it doesn't matter what we were putting on that page. Users were not going to improve their conversion rate, or they weren't going to complete the sign-up flow, because it turns out that sometimes the second page didn't load. Yep. So we found a bug, and we found that through testing our assumptions. We asked what we were assuming, and then we said, wait, are those actually true? Are there other things in the sign-up flow that maybe we should be looking at? So that's just one example of we actually didn't think through all our assumptions up front. We actually had to reflect on that afterward, and then from there define other things that we wanted to look at. And I think there tends to be a culture at many companies. I've learned that it's success theater. You only show what your successes are, not what your failures are. And it's hard to talk about the things that don't work because it feels like a waste of time, and you seem like you're not doing your job well. But at the end of the day, if you're not talking about those things that didn't work, it's hard to learn from them. So I kind of started ranting there, but I think that culture of being humble and just learning from your failures or things that just don't work is a strong piece of why our growth culture has been getting much better.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of humility. Honestly, just because I feel like I almost have to be, because like, what do I really know? Like, what does anybody really know? Like, nobody really knows anything. I mean, I think, right. Like, of all the information that's out there, every human being has a very, very tiny, slice of knowledge of anything. So there's just so much to learn that I think that's a good mentality to have, especially. Well, I guess I'd even say, I feel like with one person, like with myself, I'm like, okay, like I need to be humble. That's something I can work on. I can practice that. Okay, now you're running a HubSpot, this business, 1,000, I'm not even sure how many employees, thousands of employees. How do you make it so that there's a whole culture of like everyone feeling humble? How do you make sure everyone you hire is humble? How do you make sure everyone's doing, daily rituals of making sure that everyone stays humble or even continues to improve in that area? I mean, that's difficult. So it's cool that you have found, or that HubSpot has found a culture that not only kind of promotes that, but seems to draw on that as its kind of power source.
Yeah, it's interesting how, when I first started working here 4 years ago, the thing that was most awe-inspiring was that everyone you speak to would just be willing to talk to you and learn from you and also teach you. Everyone's always just super helpful and willing to talk to you about what they're working on. And that was something that, was very non-pretentious, and it continues to be. Somehow, our leadership has managed to, maintain that sort of culture where folks are continuing to learn and teach each other. It's a very rare company to get to work for.
Cool. I actually really like that you said that, man, because I feel like a lot of this culture stuff comes from the top down. Some people don't like to think of like top down mentality, like the boss is telling you what to do. But I really do think that a lot of times in terms of like determining what the culture is, your manager is going to manage you a certain way. Someone's managing them. They're going to manage them a certain way. Like that sort of feeling is going to come from top down if you have that kind of structure in your business. So, and as the head of my business, I really do try very hard to implement this kind of culture. I feel glad that even at a bigger company, people feel like that's true. So I'm aimed in the right direction and trying to do something right.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of the culture is driven by who your manager is. There's a phrase that I've learned. So people don't leave companies, they leave their manager, right? Mm-hmm. And if there's a manager who tends to always be stressed out and moves that pressure onto their direct reports, then the direct reports are just also going to be stressed out all the time and not feel comfortable or not feel supported. And, that generally doesn't lead to a happy relationship with that team. But I mean, I imagine if you're thinking about it and being intentional about it, yeah, I'm sure you don't need to worry about that as much as many folks. And I'm always trying to work on, empathy and making sure, if I need something from someone or need help, that it's asked in a way where it's not trying to pressure them or anything like that. It's always, hey, sure, you got a lot going on, wondering where this is going, not being demanding or anything like that. I think that's an important thing that a lot of folks at HubSpot are quite intentional about.
Yeah, that's cool. It's such an important skill. I feel like everyone's always like, yes, communication is important, but like, it really is like, it's important to be able to know how to navigate a workspace and to be able to get what you need without being pushy and to be respectful of everyone. And that part is hard, the empathy. It's people are complicated, right? Not good versus bad, just everyone. Doesn't matter who you are. Everyone's complicated. The human condition is complicated. And so it takes a lot of brain power just to navigate that. And so, yeah, I think it's something we can all practice a little bit.
I've made a joke with a friend. I mean, a joke or, just truth. Not that I know the truth or anything.
One or the other, joke or truth.
if everyone could just communicate, 10% better, I think the world would be a better place. We'd have fewer conflicts and we'd be able to have more conversations and be less stressed out, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, humans are kind of these animals that naturally kind of crave social interaction. And so it seems funny that we don't practice it very much, it seems like, anymore. Even now we're on video chat. Why didn't I fly out to wherever you are to record this podcast? Next time we'll do that. When we do
why didn't you?
Yeah,
maybe I can make a trip to DC.
Yeah, totally. Hey, you're always welcome. Cool. Last thing we kind of have here is just kind of mindset for growth, marketing, business. So like I'm on your website right now, davidlykhim.com, DAVIDLYKHIM.com. If anyone's interested, we'll throw it in the show notes and all that. But it looks like and it sounds like you work for HubSpot right now for the last 4 years or so. But I see some other companies here, Buffer, WeWork, some other companies as well. Have you kind of in your career, it seems like focused on content marketing more and kind of through the whole thing, or is that kind of new at HubSpot? Have you done similar work for some of these other companies as well?
Yeah, so for those companies, they're more of freelance work, and through content marketing, got the opportunity to do some posts for them, and it's great getting to work with them because I got to work with them relatively early on before they were still big, and I got to work with Kevin at Buffer directly, which in some ways content marketing let me connect with some really smart people. Now I continue to work with some clients on the side and advise with some nonprofits or mentor younger entrepreneurs and marketers. One of the things I enjoy most is getting to speak to those who are still in school and thinking about what they're going to do and how to get into marketing and things like that. And it's always refreshing to get to speak to someone who is super excited about the next stage of their career. And I enjoy being able to help point them in, maybe I wouldn't say the right direction, but at least trying to shape how they're thinking about all of that and letting them know that things tend to work out after school, and you don't need to stress out that much.
Yeah, I think you have the right mentality about that stuff. I give a lot of talks at WordCamps obviously I'm like talking on this podcast. I talk to a bunch of people who are listening right now. And a lot of times I have trouble giving like pure advice to people. Like, you should do this, you should do X, Y, or Z, and then you'll get A, B, or C results from that. And that's how you do it. It's easy. A lot of times what I'm trying to do is just help people to shape their own conversation in their mind and to kind of let them find their own path. Even when I give talks that's like about how to do this thing, it's not really about how to do that thing. It's more like, this is what I did and it worked or it didn't work. And you can try to do it this way, but I have no idea if it'll work for you. You have a different target audience. You're in a different industry. You have most of the things. So yeah, but I think you're right, man, that if you can give people, if you can put like a good conversation or like self-argument in someone's brain to get their brain chemistry thinking, like that to me is the value. Like if I gave you something to think about that eventually in a week you're in the shower and you're like, oh shit, like I got to do that. That's what I got to do. Like that's where the value is, I think.
Yeah. I also, one of the things it's kind of related to, actually, I think it's very much related to growth and business, is being able to recognize any invisible scripts that you're telling yourself that you may not even recognize. So one example of this is I spoke to a young woman recently who is just about to graduate. She was talking about how she is trying to get a job at a marketing agency, but also wants to continue doing photography and all these things. And one thing I noticed was that she continued to kind of doubt herself or just kind of add conditionals to what she was saying and make it seem like she wasn't sure if she'd be able to do it. And I had to tell her, like, please pause for a second. Like, what I'm hearing from you is you want to do all these things, but after each thing you say you want to do, there's a but behind it and some sort of statement where you're doubtful you can do it. I need you to stop doing that because you have these scripts in your mind that are holding you back. And it sounds kind of fluffy, but I do believe that words are powerful, and the words you tell yourself about yourself are really powerful. And it's one of those things that, from speaking to some of my women friends, they say, we tend to doubt ourselves more. And I feel like it's kind of a responsibility now that, since I have friends who told me that straight up, that I need to point it out when they're doing it to themselves or to any woman that does that to themselves. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, this young woman that I was speaking to didn't even realize that she was saying those things. And I think changing the psychology, even for myself, I do that sometimes every now and then as well. I need to catch it or have someone else call me out on it. And I think, if you don't do that for yourself and you don't have someone else doing that for you, it's easy to get in your own head.
Yeah. There's this quote that I always kind of think of: most men lead lives of quiet desperation. I forget who said it. Was it like I'll remember it. I'll say it on another episode. Sorry, listeners, you have to listen to another episode for me to remember what this quote is. But I'll remember who it was at some point. But I really feel like what you're saying is true. I think a lot of people doubt themselves. And in some sense, they should, because especially like starting a business, right? It's like most businesses fail. So like there has to be some sense of like, this may not work, even maybe probably it won't work. But the confidence that people do have to have is that they have to be confident that they're going to have to work at it for a while to get there. Like, it's not going to happen at the snap of a fingers. And if it does happen at the snap of a fingers, like, you were the goddamn exception. And every story you hear of someone that did it super quickly was also an exception. And the media tends to tell the stories of these exceptions. So you hear a lot of these exceptions. So it seems normal, but it's not. And as WP Buffs has grown and gotten a little bigger, we've got 14, 15 people on the team now. So wow. I feel like sometimes I go to WordCamps and people are like, oh, that's like Joe from WP Buffs. And the only thing I can think
that must be
like,
weird.
I am totally not like special. I have no idea how I got here. Like, I got a few things right. Like, most of the people around me like powered me to get here. And there's no secret sauce to any of this stuff. And so when I hear people like that, like doubting themselves, or they're at the beginning of their journey and they're like, how am I possibly going to get there? All I can think about is like, I still feel a lot of the same way that I did when I was starting out. There's always a lot of self-doubt. I don't know if that ever necessarily goes away. It's just how you cope with it. It's how you think about it. It's how you shape your mental state around that. It may not just be to like get rid of it. Like, I gotta not be super not confident. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, like some shit's gonna go wrong and you're gonna have to deal with it. Listeners have heard me say this a few times, so they're gonna get tired of me saying it one more time. But a lot of this stuff is just stumbling successfully. Like, you're always gonna be stumbling, but if you can do it successfully and you can make little stumbles, in 100 days you'll take 100 steps, and that's progress.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me when you say that the things that were challenging when you first started some of them are still challenging. And I looked you up on Google and I found some of your interviews, and you mentioned that you left a well-paid consulting job to working on your own startup full-time, which I can imagine was extremely tough and came with its sacrifices. But I'm curious to hear from you. I'm kind of flipping the tables here.
Yes.
What are some of those challenges that, you still have now that you did have back then when you first started? Because I think it's valuable for people to understand that those things don't go away. There's no magical milestone, I guess, from what you're saying, where things are completely solved.
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I think a lot of the challenges I still have that I had before that I still do have today is that, like, this doesn't get easier I think like a lot of people think like I'm starting off, it's so hard. And then like, but once I'm making money, like it'll be easier. And in some senses, that's true because there are a significant amount of problems that you can just kind of pay to get rid of. Like I'm having trouble with this, like, okay, I'll just buy that software to like fix that problem, or I'll hire that person to like do that thing that I don't know how to do. Like there's some things like that, but a lot of times the challenges, they don't get easier with money. In fact, they get bigger and they get even more like raw, and you have more pressure because now we have employees. And so it's like the business needs to run not just for me because I think it's awesome, but it's like, oh, we all think it's awesome. And it also powers, people's mortgages. And so I think just like, I think that it's not really about trying to make it easier. It's about like always sharpening the sword so that you can deal with the difficult stuff easier. It's never going to get easy. Like that's not what it's about. It's not what this journey is about. And wasn't what this journey was about at the beginning, and it's not now. And I don't see anything becoming easier. Like if we were 5 times as big as we were right now and had 5 times the profit margin and had 5 times the revenue and all this stuff, like we just still have 5 times bigger problems. I'm sure the problems don't just go away at some magic point. Like it's always going to be something. And so I think like getting in that zone of being used to that is something that I think it was a problem when I started, and it's still a problem now. I wouldn't even say I don't even want to call it a problem. Honestly, it's like I would actually call it like running a business or growing a business. Yeah, and it wouldn't be fun if it was easy. So I try to enjoy the challenges. Doesn't mean they're always fun, but a lot of them are. That's what else are we doing here? That's growing a business. So yeah, good question.
Out of curiosity, like I can tell you're a super humble guy, and you're very intentional and self-aware. Tell me about that first moment when you were hiring someone and you thought, wow, this person is putting their livelihood in my hands. Like they are trusting that this business will run and that I can help them pay their mortgage or take care of their family with the salary that I'm paying them. What was that feeling like?
That's a funny question. I actually don't think I really thought about it until we had like 6 or 7 employees. And then I was like, holy shit, like this better keep working, because now I don't know if I had that one moment. I think that as things like are growing, there's just always a million things happening at once. And so there are only a certain amount of bandwidth that you have as a founder or an employee, right? Everyone only has a certain amount of bandwidth. So I think that's just something I was just like, we're moving. There's a lot of stuff happening. I got stuff to do. There's always stuff to do. And then we ended up getting to this point, and it was kind of like this, like people who are self-educators. A lot of people in the WordPress space are self-educators. They listen to podcasts, they read blog posts. A lot of times you'll hear something that you need to do like 7 times, and then on the 8th time you'll be like, oh, like I got it. I should do that. That sounds great. And you're like, why didn't I do it the first 7 times? Yeah. But it wasn't because you did a bad thing. It was just because you weren't at the stage yet to require that information, or it wasn't important at that old stage, right? Like when you're one person, like hiring isn't that important. Okay, now I'm hiring. So now I'm listening to more hiring stuff and it's digesting more in my head. I think it was kind of like that. Like I just kind of like, I wasn't at that point yet where it was a thought. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, like, okay, the pressure, I now realize there's a little more pressure here. But I talk about this a lot, actually. Running a business that's more subscription-based and focused kind of on monthly revenue is a lot easier than than any business I ever ran that was like based on like building a website or one-time payments. So I do a lot of focus on monthly recurring revenue. So, but yeah, it does feel like a little more pressure. That's for sure.
I mean, that's awesome. You've grown a team to, you said 14 or 15 people. I think, few businesses get to that point. I've yet to start my own business to get that to that level. So I'm hoping, maybe I can learn a few things from you.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think they think about the number of employees and then they think that dictates like, is business successful or not? Like if I had 7 people, is my like for some people, like you hear like 14, you're like, okay, twice as successful a business. But like a lot of times that's not really true. So I'm always like with the number of employees, it doesn't really determine like your success. You could have a company of 1 and be making more money than we're making. Like there are a lot of companies like that. I just chose a different way to do things. But yeah, maybe there are a few companies that are doing a little worse than us. So maybe we're doing okay. But cool, man. Dude, this has been a really cool conversation. I appreciate you coming on. I always love talking about HubSpot. I always like talking about marketing, and I always like talking about business philosophy and all that stuff. So David, thanks a lot, man. Why don't you tell people where they can find you online, social media, websites, all that jazz?
Yeah, so folks can find me at davidlykhim.com. That's DavidLykhim.com. I am on social media, not very active, but it's at David Ly Khim, my full name as well.
Very cool. Yeah, man, I'm on your website right now. You got a nice looking picture up here, looking professional.
Doing my best, at least.
Yeah, I dig it, man. All right, last thing I always ask guests to do is to ask our audience for a little 5-star iTunes review. So if you wouldn't mind giving them a little ask right now on the air, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to everyone listening, clearly, Joe is super intelligent, has a great business running, really focused on educating the community, and just a great person to have a conversation with. I would love it if you could give Joe a 5-star review on this podcast. And I'm super honored to be welcome on this podcast and looking forward to speaking to you again.
Oh, you're making me blush, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, if people want to leave a review, make sure you leave David's name in the comments. Say something you liked about this episode. We'll shoot him the comment and be like, oh, David, check this out. Someone left us a nice little review with your name on it. If people go to WPMRR.com/iTunes, we put a little redirect in there for people. So it'll take them right to the iTunes page if people want to do that. If any listeners have questions, feel free to email us at yo@WPMRR.com. I man that inbox personally, so I will get back to you with any questions. But if you have any questions you want us to answer on the show, we're always looking for new topics, and we'd love to get some audience engagement as well and just answer some of those questions directly. If you are a new listener, come on in and binge some episodes. You already binge all your crazy shows online. You spend hours a day watching TV. Why don't you binge something that's going to help your business move forward? You don't have to go back and listen to every episode, but go back through, pick a few that are going to be applicable to you right now. Like I was talking about before, maybe not every episode is something is gonna add value to you right now, but I'm sure there are a few in there. So go back and check those out. WPMRR.com/podcast. WPMRR.com. That's WordPress monthly recurring revenue. We just shortened that to WPMRR.com. If you're a WordPress agency or freelancer, feel free to check out our video course on there. WP Buffs is the company I started, and we do 24/7 website support. We pretty much open source that business and put it into a video course so that people can add recurring revenue to their business models by just kind of selling some care plans. So make sure you take advantage of that 30% off discount that is currently on the site. Cool. Man, wrapped it up. You will hear from us again next Tuesday. David, thanks again for coming on. It's been real.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Talk to you soon.